Hi, I'm Ms. Mechanism from Ascended Heart Navigators. I am a musician and a, well, spiritual healer and podcast host with Nataraja.
Yes, hello, I'm Nataraja. I'm also with Ascended Heart Navigators, working with Meka on this project. And we have our first special guest with us, who is in studio with Meka.
I am Andre Diniz.
I
am an author, a fiction writer, but also an actor, a million different things. I'm an artist, and I've known Meka for a very long time. We're very close friends, and so I'm honored to be here.
Yay!
Yay! So this is really exciting. So you're here, you're working on a project with Meka. And this is not the first project you guys have worked on together. And so we're going to be talking about basically learning from you and your experiences together in art, and your spirituality, and how you collaborate, and like talking about collaboration and gifting, and spirituality within art. And so I have a bunch of questions that I prepared for you guys. Yay! So we're gonna do
Amazing.
So as we're so Meka and I have been talking for a while about the new earth that we're creating. We're moving. Humanity is shifting into a very different kind of paradigm, and a lot of the old is going away, and we're creating a lot of the new. And I feel like there's a lot to learn from your experiences and creating the new. And one of the things that I want to talk about is gifting, and what gifting looks like within a new paradigm of living, what collaboration looks like, and what the merging of spirituality with professional paths, and what that looks like. And it's basically, it's okay. We're going into a new world, a new way of being, and being spiritual and professional is our new way of being. So I want to start off with talking about your art and creativity. Meka, so you remember we had the transformation work that we're doing. There was a psychic that was talking. I can't remember her name. I'm not very good with names. But
I should have looked it up. Yeah.
It's here somewhere.
Yes.
It's there somewhere. But she was talking about, she's a psychic, and from what she is getting from the spirit realm is that art and music, it's like the higher connection with the divine. And so I'm really super curious about how you feel that the divine speaks through your art and creativity, and how that has changed the lives of people around you.
Well, I'm going to start a little bit and just introduce what I know of my experience growing up with Andre as artists and discovering ourselves. Watching Andre work as a writer, in our early days in childhood, teenagehood, I saw that he was writing from a higher place in himself. He was definitely writing beyond his years, and he was definitely talking to me about channeling and like bringing it in through a divine source, and just like trancing out and just writing, like his pen would just write. And that was one of my first encounters with that. And from there, I realized that art and creation could be a very connected, aligned, higher self experience connected to the divine. And it actually really is, because you're creating, and it's a creative act. So it is very important to be from there, because, we are moving from something that's a very surface mentality and like our 3D world into something a little bit higher frequency, and, based in, higher acts of creation. So I definitely think that my intro to Andre's work and understanding that kind of set the stage for my life and watching him work.
I mean, I think that, Meka and I have always been very spiritually inclined people, I think, since I can't ever remember.
Right.
And like even, you know, back then we were already talking about subjects and topics and things that were, I don't want to say beyond our years, because I think teenagers can be very thoughtful and explorative in what's happening in their lives and so on. We happen to also be very spiritual artists even back then. And so that was always something that we valued. And so, but I do remember since a young age, like channeling. And now I, you know, back then I only had so much knowledge about it. Now I fully know what I'm doing when it comes to channeling and connecting with my spirit guides and so on. And, but back then I just know that in order for me to write characters or even to play characters as an actor, to me, I always have been able to begin with one, yes, what's on the page or what I want to convey, but also I create characters from the spiritual realm down, and then I create some of that, and then I figure out what their physicality is, and then I go back to spirit because I want to see how that now modifies once the physical is there and so on. And I think that's kind of like what birthing is really. Like there's a preliminary spiritual thing that's laid out, and then as that person is living in the physical realm, it starts to modify and affect the higher. So then I do that same kind of process with creating characters.
Woo! That's deep,
right? And
awesome.
So I think like Meka and I have always been like talking about it. I think, you know, we talked at one point how like each song is a character in itself. Yeah. And like, you know, if you were to pick up even some of her earlier work that I also still remember vividly, like the creation of all of that, and how, you know, songs like Decapitated and Bedlam from different albums, like they're so, even Mr. Potato Head, which you would do every now and then, and it's like they have their own little personas, right? Yeah. I mean, it's all coming from you and spirit, but it's like they all have their own little intentions and things behind them, right? And so, but I think you can only really affect people in a spiritual way if you yourself as an artist tap into spirit when you're creating. And if you don't, then yes, you can still affect somebody, but now you've made that process much more difficult, because it's that same thing, you know, like how can you love somebody else if you can't love yourself? But it's so how can you affect someone spiritually if you haven't affected yourself? And so
right. And then, but also like affecting people emotionally, you know, even if it is not intentional, right? The creating or fomenting emotion, and I think that connection of art is connecting to something within someone, right? And we know that the divine speaks through emotions. So whatever, as an artist, whatever you both are creating emotionally is actually like this like divine, from I don't know, from what I'm feeling is like this like divine communication that it's almost like you're opening up a channel of divine communication just by the emotion that you're invoking through your work, I would think, right?
Oh yeah. And you know, I've seen it in both of our lives pretty clearly, and it's because people will openly respond. I've seen, you know, people of his latest novel, Ripped in Two, emotionally respond and connect to his universe, you know, and people that didn't know him, you know, I of course deeply know him, and, you know, so I've had a response, but to see people so relate to these characters in this world and be really, really opened up by it has been very profound for me to witness, you know. And then as a live show, I mean, we both perform live. He performs mostly theater and I perform mostly rock and roll, but they're both theatrical and fun and different and evocative in their own ways. You know, in theater, you expect people to have moments of joy or tears, you know, because you're storytelling. And I think I've been able to, you know, Andre's always kept me connected to theater. So even in my solo acoustic shows or my full blast metal shows or my J-pop punk shows with the Origami Girls, I've always been a storyteller. So I will evoke either comedy or, sadness, especially in my early work, and more recently, more spiritual empowerment, manifestation, or just confidence building. And so I've seen either people like that I never thought that would relate to me. Like I remember doing a solo acoustic act in, like outside of Atlanta, Georgia. People, no one knew me. And I performed a show, and this, guy from the country, from the South, came up to me and said, like, I haven't cried in years. I didn't know how I felt until I heard your music. I want to buy everything. And that meant a lot to me as a 20-year-old, girl, just kind of taking a chance and driving up by herself to Atlanta to play a show. And seeing that somebody who would never have related to me be moved to tears. And then more recently, people, of course, emoting during those moments. I've seen people cry in Andre's shows, and I've, of course, laughter. And then most recently, seeing, people, fans, tribe members who've connected to the art say that it's helped them through alcoholism, or it's helped them, save their lives and give them encouragement for another day. I mean, those are the reasons that, art is worthy, to a lot of people, because it means it impacts their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I'm creating something, at least, I mean, first of all, I want to say I've seen Meka even take great care on how she even creates a set list, like beginning, middle, and end of it, what the journey is for that evening, what she wants to convey at that moment. And that's beyond even like the original writing of the song. When she first wrote it, what did she mean then and what does it mean to her now? But I think because she takes the time to explore all of that, then she's able to convey that to the audience, and someone can take it however they want. I mean, I know that like when I am putting something together, a project, you mentioned Ripped Into, the novel. It's out on Amazon. Go get it. Ripped Into. It's paranormal drama. Or even
drama. I love it.
I know.
And when I was doing Variations of Time and Nature, which is another book that's out, it's an anthology of short stories and poems, like with everything that I'm doing there, all I feel like I can do at that moment is figure out the spiritual path for each character, or even for each poem. Every poem has a character built into it. And so every song does. And figure what that is. And as long as those people are staying true to their past that I'm envisioning, or that I'm downloading from spirit, in the channeling, then all I can hope is that they are enough to help somebody else in some way who sees something that they can relate into in the story. In Ripped Into, there's a number of characters in it, but I've seen people relate to this character more than that one, or this one is, or that particular moment resonates with somebody more than someone else, or, and I think it's because they all, or in the same with Meka's song, someone might resonate, be like, oh, that's my favorite song, or this is my favorite album. And the reason why people like resonate with different things is that they're all powered by different elements. And so so I think then people are able to resonate. And so yes, it might help someone with depression. I know there's like elements of that in the novel that I wrote. There's elements of loss and dealing with partnership and parenthood and so on and so forth. I mean, and you will, all I can hope is that overall the work will in some form tap into whatever journey they happen to be going through at that time. I mean, I've had books that sometimes I've read and then I reread, 15 years later, and they affected me. Totally. Same with movies. Sometimes you see a movie when you're young and it affects you so much, and then later you're like, how was that? It's horrible. Or the other way around, or it's horrible then, and then you watch it 20 years later and you're like, oh my God, I don't know.
I missed that.
Yeah, I think it's just because all you can hope is that it will affect you in the person that's consuming it in some way.
And I have to ask, or make a comment and ask Andre about this, because his latest novel and anthology are connected. They're actually, the anthology is a companion of short stories and poetry that are written by the main, one of the characters in the novel. And then he's expanding out and building this whole Torn Skin universe. So all of his projects that he's creating relate. That seems like really evidence of divine connection and how we actually relate, in life. It seems way more, indicative of what is actually happening on a more scale of reality in the human experience. So was that a divinely inspired, or like, how did you come to that?
Yes. I mean, yes. And I have a story I can tell about that, but I'm going to leave it for another time because it's very long. But I was going to say how the Torn Skin universe, which is what I named the universe I'm creating, how that came about, but I can talk about that at another point in time.
Excellent.
Maybe in a second interview, who knows?
Yes!
But yes, I did. Even when I create characters, I create,
or a third.
I create like an entire lifetime for them. I remember I was talking to somebody years and years and years ago. I played Chino in West Side Story. It's at a regional theater. And I had pages upon pages of like Chino being, I think he's 14 or 15 in that. It's a long time ago, but I remember why he decides to move to the United States, who he was in Puerto Rico before he went, who his parents were, what happened to them, because how come this random teenager is roaming the streets of New York City, by himself? What was his faith and what happened to him? And why is he so connected to Bernardo, who is, Maria's brother in the play, in the musical? And so, I mean, there's just so much. And then why he eventually shoots Tony, and he's the one that shoots him in the play. So like, to me, there was an entire lifetime. And then what happens to me afterwards? I mean, the play ends at one point, but what happens to that boy as he grows older, and when does he die? I knew all of that. And then eventually I went into spiritually, why did it happen this way for him? If there's a higher power, what was the higher power doing? What was he trying to learn? If there's past lives and all of that, what was the point of all of it? So I had all of this stuff. Clearly, not all of it is going to come through in the performance. But for me, I've always been inclined to portray things and write things from like that giant spiritual level. So at one point for me, as I was putting together Ripped in Two, the idea of that, I went, why, if I'm writing a character who's a writer and who's going to write novels within this novel, wouldn't it be cool? I've always thought this, like, wouldn't it be cool to have that character's work actually come out and be published? So if someone is a painter, wouldn't you like to see his paintings and maybe be able to purchase it, or just to understand more about each person? Because I think that's just how you can, like, the further you dive into them, the more you see how it's affecting everybody and so on and so forth. So for me, yes, to me, it was like, the idea I feel like was given to me.
Nice.
And so I kind of went, that's the direction. And I just tried to listen. So so Elijah, who's the main character in Ripped in Two, is writer, and Variations of Time and Nature is an anthology of poems and short stories that he writes in Ripped in Two, but I decided to write it as Elijah and publish it as a separate companion piece of work to the novel. So you can see how that character chooses to take moments out of his life and turn it into poetry, turn it into a short story. And where does he draw inspiration to after having read the novel? You can see like, oh, that moment happened in the novel, he turned into a poem. And so like, I wanted to kind of show how artists work. And for me, I'm going to keep doing that as the Torn Skin universe keeps evolving. Whenever you see artists in those novels, rest assured that their work will probably come out at some point, because I want to keep showing. And so Meka is one of the first artists I'm collaborating with in the Torn Skin universe. Like, we're writing, I have a stage play called Binary Stars, and it has music in it. And Miss Mechanism is a character in it who releases an album in that storyline. that affects everybody in New York City. Like she's up and coming. That's the character. And Meka, there are 8 songs, which is a companion album to that stage play, which is all part of the Torn Skin universe. The play has characters from both the first novel and the upcoming second novel, merges them together. And Miss Mechanism is a part of that. And as I go through this universe, I'll be collaborating with different artists, but I want to make sure I started with the artist I've known the longest in my life and that I've been inspired by the longest.
That's so awesome.
She's the one.
I want to ask you guys, both of you, a little bit more about collaboration. And so I've noticed in the music and arts and the performance, arts industry specifically, there seems to be collaboration is like a big part of your work together. And can you speak a little bit more to how collaboration has, like, individually and also in you two working together? What does that look like?
I think that the act of collaboration is, vulnerability and trust. I think one of the greatest ways we've collaborated is giving each other feedback over the years and helping each other grow and, witnessing the journey, but really being able to be a sincere resource of response. And I also think that makes things come, that willingness to share a journey together and give authentic feedback is also cultivating a frequency of love and gratitude that we kind of stay in, because, it is nice to be able to be like, okay, I have this project. Oh, can I have this project? Then like sharing the experience of that with somebody that you can trust and be vulnerable with and grow with, and be able to hear things that aren't so good and be able to take criticism really well because it comes from a place of love. And to me, that's indicative of what's coming in more of a 5D reality, as we call it, which is, I think, a frequency shift. I think it's more, instead of things being really surface and people feeling really disconnected, I think the artists are definitely the ones who have always shared this authenticity and higher self and worked together in their most vulnerable and their most creative and with the most gratitude. So they're shifting the frequency of the world. And if people in other areas and other industries mimic that quality, I think it could actually change the world. I heard, a spiritual healer say recently on Mind Valley that, you get in the frequency of love and gratitude, you literally instantly affect 750,000 people around you with your frequency. Mm-hmm. And they're getting into the science of that, which is not my field of expertise, but I do feel that difference. So if they do act that, like, how many times have we, given feedback for our art, and how many people in your life are, part of that feedback system of give and take?
Yeah, I mean, Meka and I, from literally the beginning, I've seen the persona of Miss Mechanism change and evolve, and as it will keep doing as we're going through life. And we've always had this like anchor, I think, which is to be able to go to each other and be like, what do you think? What does this look like? And to be able to tell someone who's creating something, right? And what feels like a child, like, and to kind of say what's not working or how you can improve, and to be able to be open and to actually bother to look at the person's piece that they're showing to you and literally take the time to sit and think and do it seriously, to give feedback, and then to be able to be open enough to listen and to allow it to change, to better, like, how you can better the passing of the message you're trying to push through. I think that's what we have gifted to each other the most. I mean, we've done other things. Well, like she directed a one-man show that I was in, that I wrote at one point, like we've we've
always
done,
taking roles
I don't know,
for each other.
props for each other's
what roles
shows.
do we
Or
need
like,
to put in?
I mean, we've done so much that it's like, but I think overall what I have found as an artist is that collaboration, like even with my novel, like I know that if it wasn't for the people who feedback to me, who I do think in the last page of the novel, there's 8 of them that were so valuable, and they're all extremely 8 different artists.
Yeah.
They do completely different things, all kinds of backgrounds and ages and ethnicity. And because I wanted to make sure that that I was appealing to as many types of people as possible. The message was being conveyed in some way, whether you were, you know, from a certain age or a certain background. And so it was interesting. I'm so thankful for those people, and they know how thankful I am about it, because if it wasn't for them taking the time to read an entire novel and give me feedback on it, like I wouldn't have been able to get it to where it's at. I mean, nothing is ever perfect. If you think it is, you're probably wrong. But at one point you have to allow it to leave you, right? And so, but you can get it to as close to the target as possible before it leaves you. And so I feel like that is definitely, I think, in the artistic community that I encountered, is to take those moments. We talked about how honorable it is, how honored I feel when someone comes up to me and they says, I'm trusting you to look at this raw piece of work that is all over the place and to kind of give me some direction on what you think and see. And I go, I don't take that as like, some people go like, oh, I don't want to do it. Like I go, yes, I want to do it. If I can't do it at that moment, I'll say I can't, because then I think it also sucks for you to say you can and then you don't. But like I go, when I say I can, I can. And then we do it. And then I just feel like later on, there might be an exchange of that coming back to you. But I think that is what I have found is like the greatest gift giving, that between the artists.
There's a lot of time and energy that goes into, and often like feedback, and you guys were talking about how important you have grown as artists from each other's feedback, and it takes a lot of time, especially if you're really wanting to contribute to someone's path artistically or in any way. Actually, the amount of time and energy it does take to offer feedback doesn't really, I mean, it could have a dollar value assigned to it, but typically it doesn't. Right?
In New York and LA, it does.
Well, sometimes there is. I mean, you literally can pay people to give you feedback, and you can pay people to doctor your work, which is what they call when they're coming in to fix something. I mean, television studios, movie studios do it all the time, where someone does a screenplay and then another person comes in and fixes it. And even while it's shooting, a lot of people are modifying it, you know, and so it's just, it literally touches so many, but those people are all paid to do it. And so like there's definitely that you can find, but like finding people who are not necessarily doing that, I think, so, and I mean, that money value can be very high. Right. So what I'm saying is it is a huge...
But in the art community, this kind of collaboration and gifting happens quite frequently, correct?
Yeah, it does. I think, I mean, in my experience, it has, and I've been lucky to do that. And I've also honored the moments in which they're presented to me.
And I think that that's the way I would say it in my, esoteric language, is that my love language is acts of service. And my way of receiving love is acts of service. And I think that it does make things like wanting to step into those roles is kind of what I think, Charles Eisenstein has been talking about with gift culture, and they've been trying to have experimenting, examples of, and like Burning Man. Like Burning Man is based on gifting and gift economy. So I think that we're learning that there is possibility of like a new way of life, which, I always say that if you want to look at where the revolutions come from, look at the art first, of any generation.
true.
Artists change the way. I mean,
because they're the imagination, right?
I mean, the artists we remember and the people who like, well, even some we forget, but the ones that really do affect
the way the scientists or politicians work.
Change. I mean, it really begins with art. I mean, I'll say this as like a gay man myself, and like growing up in the, when I did, and seeing like the attitudes and point of view throughout the world change toward that community. It really, in my opinion, it literally became through art. I mean, when Will and Grace like started as a television show, everyone was like, oh. And then since then, I have seen, and even prior to Will and Grace too, because I watch a lot of old shows as well. Like I like to consume everything, but like there was an elevation, the number of gay characters that were put on movies and television shows past that point where now you almost cannot find a TV show that doesn't have a gay character. Right. And it's become, and it's because there was a conscious or subconscious choice, need for change from an artist's point of view to have that group of people be looked at a different way. Yes. So you really start there, like, and if you want change, it's what they say in diversity too. They were saying, I mean, as they are saying, you want change and diversity, then be the change. Like begin demanding projects that encourage diversity, write them, and so, and produce them, and cast them differently and so on. And then therefore, but where did that start? It started in art, right? Yeah. So I think artists are always affecting and
and Einstein even says that. Einstein says, you can't even observe science, physics, anything without first being able to imagine it. Mm-hmm. So the fact that even modern physicists like Nassim, I don't know his last name, but he was on Mind Valley, who said, well, of course Einstein said that, because if you really want to know what the future looks like, look at the art, look at like the science fiction, because that's where we get the basis for what even to try to invent or explore or discover, and then from there build our future.
I mean, right. I think true artists, I mean, I can't speak for all artists, this is all my points of view, but like true artists observe what's happening, consume it, figure out what they want to regurgitate out of that, and then figure out what they want to say out of everything they've taken in, and then expand the universe with it and make us all think bigger and with more love and gratitude. Artists have big hearts for a reason. They want to change the world through their art and say something deeper and connect in a higher level. I think that artists are fully having the capacity to share stories and develop like compassion between people that would never be able to relate without art. Like, us being able to watch a story of someone in a country far, far away that has a different entire worldview, and us being able to see their story on the screen and be able to get a view into that, we can get compassion for it and relate and love them, and love, is expanding. And I think it's because of art. So
and our work together, Meka, with Ascendant Heart Navigators, it's really interesting that you both are talking about this, because that's a lot of the communication that we've been receiving, and we're talking about is the creation, and are the stories, the belief systems, it all comes from this place of creation. Right. And it's very interesting when we look at art, and we also look at our minds, and that all comes from what we're creating in our thoughts become what we're experiencing in reality. And it's beautiful when you're both talking about like the artist, when you're creating things. And I've had this discussion with someone recently, is looking at all the in the past, especially through American film and books, this obsession with like apocalyptic themes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like looking at this and I was like, wow, like artistically, we've like almost created in, you know,
world, yeah.
almost everything that we've put on film and writing, you know, and it's interesting to think about, okay, as artists, as individuals, looking at how we, from an artistic standpoint, that we can create something intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we can, yeah, I mean, there's the secret that we've been talking about in Ascended Heart Navigators is how are we more intentionally creating our lives? So how are we more intentionally writing the stories that we want to exist in our future? Mm-hmm. I will say that something that Andre and I both have done with our art is given love and compassion and light to the shadow side of ourselves too. And I think that's part of our healing. The fact that we can look at heartbreak and shine a light at it, and those feelings that we shared human experience, feelings of not feeling included or validated, or feeling abandoned, or feeling, any stage of trauma, bringing those things to light puts it in the light, those shadow aspects, the things that are hidden in our subconscious. And therefore, when you put it in the light, you can have compassion for it. I think the next stage, coming into our art is how we're intentional. What else can we do to intentionally create a more positive, connected future? And we can do that through what art we create and what love we weave in to the stories and the messages that we're, spreading and radiating out into, consciousness.
Yeah, I definitely.
So I want to bring back the conversation we started with, and I know Meka because I've known you for a while, but Andre, I'm hearing you talk about the spiritual aspect of, you're talking about channeling, you're talking about that you've been on a spiritual path, and from both of you, you had this spiritual aspect of yourself and how that's becoming more interwoven into your work, and like where do you see the spiritual aspect of your work and how it's merging into your professional life?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if I said this before, but for people who don't know, you can also look it up. But like channeling is when you feel like you're receiving information from spirit, and then you're putting it down in some artistic form, whether it's in writing or in whatever other form. So the way I know that I work is that a lot of times when I know I'm going to write, and this can take 10 minutes, it can take an hour plus, I literally will set the mood and shut everything down and be in darkness in my bedroom currently. And then I will wait until I feel connected to my guides. And I literally sometimes have to put myself under a blanket as well and be like in that much darkness until I start having visions and seeing of where things should be going. And then sometimes I see movement in between the characters, and then I start asking questions and they start being answered. And sometimes I get whole sentences and things, and at one point when I feel like it's enough has been revealed for that day, then I sit down and start writing. So so it can take, can be tiring, but it's just how I learned to create. And so, yeah.
And you're actually a really good spiritual advisor because of that.
Yeah, I'm also a medium. Like on my website, you see the page there for psychic readings. My website.
Can you remind us of your website again, Andre?
AndreDinizArtist.com.
We'll post it too.
AndreDiniz artist.com.
Yes.
And over there, it explains the work that I do, but I'm able to see like past events, predict future events. I'm able to get in touch with like spirit of loved ones have passed, and I hear and I can see, and there's a lot of that.
I've seen him like solve mysteries, like really like get in there and find details that people need to know.
But I do the same thing. I know it can sound the way it sounds, but I try to psychically read characters and see like what can happen to them. Like if I was meeting this guy or this woman, like what would I see for them if I was doing them a reading, like based on what I know of them and where they're at that moment, like where do I see it going? So like I use those tools that have been given to me on like my daily experience and I apply it in this way into my work. I mean, in Variations of Time and Nature, the anthology, there's a character there who is a psychic, and then I go into how she works and so on and so forth.
That's a good story.
But I'll tell you this, spirituality for me is always where everything begins and ends. And so even in my work in improv and sketch comedy, which I've been studying for a while now at the Groundlings in LA, which is like a major worldwide known sketch comedy program, which is really difficult to go through, and it's very character based, right? So for me, that program is designed, I found myself paired very well with that program because for me, I can't even do comedy unless I can't even create a character to portray on stage and to like live through whatever funny moment they're living for 3 minutes or whatever, unless I understand fully what that spiritual path is for that character.
What?
Yeah, that's
based on,
love it.
Based on that, I at that point can like, the moment like someone's giving in an improv is giving kind of like a prompt, oh, you guys are at the beach or this is happening, I am already on stage tapping into who I might choose as a character for that scene. And then immediately I tap into like what their spirituality is. And then I can just move through the scene and I know what's happening to them, why they will make certain choices or not based on what their spiritual path is. So, so that's where I always begin anything that I do, even improv and sketch comedy for me. I mean, I have pages and pages in every character that I do at that place, like, and a lot of it is spiritually based.
That's incredible. You know? That's genius. Yeah,
that is genius. And then Meka, what about your spirituality? And you want to recap, because I know we talk about it a lot, but you know this is a great
moment today. Well, I think Andre and I, you know, kind of grew together as, you know, doing tarot readings from an early age, and spiritual advisement for each other. But, you know, it's definitely become a huge and more important part of my life, you know, in the past few years, you know, after, you know, studying Reiki and then shamanism and being invited to study with, you know, a very amazing teacher who was Siberian, but taught me like the mesa medicine bag work of Peru. And like to be invited to be able to learn that is awe-inspiring enough in and of itself. So I really try to hold those traditions in as much, you know, respect in my heart as possible. And then I like learning theta healing with Michelle Orwick and becoming, you know, an actual tarot card reading at all these different places, you know, the theme parks and the, you know, the esoteric shops in Orlando. Like you relate to people in a different way. And I would love to insist on higher self conversations in every interaction in my life. But that's where you get higher self conversations. And because of higher self conversations like those, where you're really authentic with each other, that's where you create art. That's where you create your life. So therefore, of course, it's going to come out in any act of creation. So me being able to speak to people in a spiritual way on a regular basis has put me more heart-centered in my creation instead of being passive about it. In like, you know, my shamanic character of Mechanism, the band, you know, the metal band, I've been able to like step in and be like, okay, how do I take people on a heart healing journey? So like, you know, the reason we started Ascended Heart Navigators was to follow that journey and what that looks like in different ways and aspects. But like, how do you take someone through, you know, story and sound and frequency and poetry and song and actually move them through a heart healing journey? Like, how do you guide them to discover it for themselves and give them the tools, resources, and literally sound path in some way, frequency path to evoke that heart healing journey, you know, and then study all these experts, you know, we're doing the 60 days of transformation with Heather Lowell and, you know, listening to people like Dr. Joe Dispenza and, you know, hearing these people with a scientific perspective and seeing how frequency meditation connection affects people, you know, of course, in a cerebral way, a spiritual way, and then of course it, you know, affects your physical body. You know, you can change your body through your mind. So higher self conversations, awesome, can change everything. We're creators of art, but we're also creators of life. So I think that that's something I've grown and shared with Andre throughout the years. And now we're both also helping people spiritually and kind of creating opportunities to have those higher self, higher heart conversations, which is when people do have readings and healing sessions, they're most vulnerable, but it's also their most authentic, and they have that process.
With that said too, as much as I feel like I'm able to help, and I also am very fully aware of like the moments, endless moments that already have happened and are going to happen of people who have helped me in my spiritual journey too. Like I'm not all knowing, and I will never be, and I don't aspire to. And even in my psychic readings, I tell people right away, I'm not 100%. My rate of success so far has been high, but I can get it wrong. You also have the power to change anything in your life. Yeah. So if I tell you this is what the outcome is most likely to be for you based on the actions you've taken up to today, it's up to you to continue to take those actions or not. And free so choice. You know, and but I also know that I have also struggled in my life. Will probably can struggle again in one way or another. And I know the people who have directly or indirectly helped me, and both living and dead. And so right. I just so I am aware that it's all like, as much as I am trying to help, I'm also asking for help, getting it, and finding hopefully the opportunity to pass
more
on
collaboration.
Yeah.
With the spirit world, it sounds like. That's all.
Perfect. We're all collaborating. Yes.
And we are, you know, we're all collaborating with the spirit world, whether we know it or not, right?
Yeah. You know, in the beginning of each piece of work, including Binary Stars, when it is published and out, I have an afterword, a foreword and an afterword to every piece where I reveal certain internal things and external things that drove me, main things that drove me to create that piece of work. And usually they're very personal things that I'm talking about. And I know that a lot of times as an artist, I explore a path that I felt I was saved from. Not necessarily that I regret not taking, but that I was saved from by friends and family, or choices I was about to make that could have been drastic in my life.
Right.
So, and I explore those in literature or in art, because I feel like I still take that journey in some way. And in this way, I am able to not have to research that, talk to people who have, you know, been through it. And then this way, I think it instructs me to learn about it and be able to eventually pass on that knowledge and so on, you know?
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So as we're moving forward with this project, Ascendant Heart Navigators, we're going to be hearing, I'm sure, more about your collaborations together with Binary Stars and
yay!
And your healing offerings. You know, this is I'm glad, Andre, to meet you and to know that you're another psychic medium that's out there that's doing amazing artistry and writing books and plays.
Trying the best I can.
Yes!
Yeah, incredible. I'm honored to meet one of Meka's collaborators in art, and also another healer that's out there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here too. So happy. My first.
So thank you both for thank you for being our first like official guest on our show. It's so awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this. I think it's great, and I think that you both are going to be able to do a lot of great things even through this, you know, podcast alone.
Heck yeah.
Yay. All right, thanks you guys. Thank you.
Have a good night. We are Ascended Heart Navigators. Have a great night, everybody.
Night.